of people who went against the grain.
It was crucial to their future to be in the classroom.
We're actually safer as a result of being in school.
Courageous Leadership Through Crisis. Live from the Blue Bear Cafe, this is Voices of Courage.
Hello, Dr. Kim Morrison back here, Superintendent, Mount Airy City Schools. And today I get to interview my good friend, Sean Gaillard. We go way back looking at innovative schools in Forsyth County when we were putting in a lot of different programs. And Sean put in one of the highest performing programs there. He is now the principal of Appalachian State University Academy at Middle Fork. He was North Carolina Regional Principal of the Year, who led an elementary school during the worldwide pandemic. And luckily, I'm able to join you again, who led Mount Airy City Schools to be the first public school district in North Carolina to come back 5 days in person, August of 2020. Thank you, Sean, for being with us today.
Kim, thank you so much for having me here. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
We have a few questions for you as a courageous leader in education. In this white paper, I was able to take a lot of different conversations with leaders from all levels, from students to principals to central office administration to superintendents to epidemiologists that led through COVID and all kinds of folks. And about 20 of those are in my paper. And now we're zooming in and having some interviews with these folks to say, what are trends that will help other leaders lead through crisis? And it is interesting. We presented in San Antonio last week with one of my principals, and he said, unprovoked, the leaders at that table from all around the country had the same trends. This is what you need to do if you're going to lead through crisis. Mr. Gaillard was one of the first trends mentioned in the Voice of Courage paper. That is, all leaders leading through crisis need to dig deep. Believe in your core values as a leader. We talked last podcast about your why, finding your why, making sure you clarify your why, deeply understand your why. Right after that comes your core beliefs. And how do you know what you believe? Well, if you're in a crisis like the pandemic, it kind of exposes what you believe. So do you mind elaborating on if you were able to believe in yourself as you led through the pandemic? What helped you kind of uncover your core beliefs?
Well, a lot of things, Kim. One of the things, and I may have shared this or at some point with you. I said this. I've said this statement a lot when I first became a principal, and I said, I didn't learn this in principal school. I didn't learn this. There, and then you get through it, and you experience it, and then you keep it moving. Well, there is certainly in any MSA program, there is nothing about a pandemic. There probably will be now, but that statement took on a whole new meaning because there was no reference point, or at least I felt that there wasn't a reference point. I had been through, as a leader, different crisis points before. So a lot of those experiences helped me get through. But this was completely unknown. So therefore, I had to dig very deeply into not only my core as a leader, but I also had to be able to kind of walk that talk. And so a lot of that belief as a leader during that time, first and foremost, faith. Okay, so I relied heavily upon my faith, and then I'm very fortunate that I have a strong family unit around me that I could kind of lean on, and to me, my best advisor in many things in all things is my wife. Also a teacher, not in the same school. But then also to me, my best leadership advisors or my parents, my mother and father. So I leaned on them too, just for advice and counsel. But I was also, in addition to that, you also, and I learned this from my dad, as a leader, you have to be humble, and you have to be humble enough and embrace humility and just say, I don't know, and then to seek out advice and wisdom from others. So leaning on other principals, leaning on former assistant principals that I had the ability and opportunity to coach, um, tuning into my professional learning network and other principals and leaders on a national and global level, and engaged in conversations and going, hey, how do you deal with this? What is how are you building these solutions? But all of that, just in terms of my core as a leader, is always, and you know this, and I learned this from you. Sometimes that barrier or that no can become an opportunity. And so I looked at those moments, and I was tested big time. I looked at those moments as, all right, a problem is an opportunity to show the solution. A problem is an opportunity to teach those around me. And again, I was also lucky too that I had a great instructional leadership team. I had a great admin team. I had a great assistant principal, a great instructional facilitator, but then also allowing myself to build that trust, not only with that team and having them kind of build solutions together, because it was a team effort, but then also leaning on our teachers and our staff as well. It really, I know COVID brought out a lot of tragedy for a lot of folks, me included. I lost 2 family members during that time, but it also it brought out an opportunity for a lot of folks to shine. So I even though I was the leader during that time, there are a lot of folks on the school level, the community level, and the district level that I was able to lean on and to draw strength from to help me do what I needed to do as a leader for that school during that time.
Great. And I go back to, building on your faith and how difficult the crisis was. Think about the Red Sea and the barrier between you and the promised land. The
That's right.
barrier is sometimes the miracle.
That's
And
right.
so we have to go through it. We're not going to go over it. We're not going to go around it. We had to go through it. And coming
Man.
out on the other end, that miracle then will lead us to take children with us through those really tough, difficult things. One of the pieces that every voice of courage mentioned struggling with was fear.
Yes.
At the very beginning, we were afraid. We were responsible for those souls, those children, those staff members coming in those buildings. A lot of it was unknown. That was something in my core that I didn't realize that I was just going to be like, we're going to do this. And I'm going to help lead through it. There's no other choice. And I think that helps you dig deep into your core why. If you know the children are not going to come back without you, leading, then all of a sudden you better get confident in your leadership. And I heard that from, the superintendent in Selma. I heard that from Wake County superintendent. A lot of people just said, I knew I had to stay. It was a calling. I didn't have any choice in my mind if those children were going to come back in the fall. So, can you respond to this quote that you had when we did the interview? Does it still resonate now? How can leaders be cheerleaders for their team to keep them positive through the difficult times? The quote, I believe, said, believe in yourself and your core values. You're the right person for the job. Believe in your team, believe in the mission, believe in the kids. There needs to be visible belief as you are going through a crisis and accept that failure will happen along the way, but people have invested in you. Be the cheerleader for change and keep moving forward.
Yeah, that visible belief. It's one thing to say, I believe in you. It's one thing to put it in a memo and you check the box and you say that when I'm not a big fan of flying. I mean, I'll do it if I have to, but there's turbulence along the way, and when I'm sitting up there at 38,000 feet, I want to make sure that the crew is making it happen and keeping us safe. And I drew upon that analogy a lot during that time. You still have to as a leader. Todd Whitaker, somebody that we were both connected to, says that when the principal sneezes in the building, everyone feels that. And when we're dealing with a serious life and death situation, we cannot be that voice of panic, but we also cannot be that voice of reservation. We were going through uncharted territory, so I had to be, and especially in Zoom. I mean, I know we're in a Zoom thing now, so I had to make sure that my belief, my body language, my tone, my presence, how I responded, was visceral and affirming and nurturing, as the steward of the building during that time. So we go up in a plane, you don't want to hear the cat. You just flew from San Antonio. And I'm sure you dealt with some turbulence in that jet stream. All those flight attendants were smiling, and maybe the captain was real and said, "Listen, we're going to go up 5,000 feet because we are dealing." They don't say turbulence, but they say something else, like
In the wind.
something like that. Like, we're going to have some heavy wind or
Yeah.
some uncomfortable wind, and they say it in a way that, but that's the same thing that we've got to do as leaders. And then our teachers and our students were dealing with things that were unprecedented. So any moment that I could find that was good, I multiplied it 10 times. I shouted it out. I made sure that those moments of praise, and I begin all of my meetings and blogs with praise and thanks, and calling out the good, and it was hard some days. It really was. Teachers struggling with Canvas, teachers struggling with Zoom, students, and families who weren't in the typical traditional classroom environment. For a while, we were virtual. So I did, but then also on my end, I wanted to make sure that I was walking that talk. So two things that I did to show that belief and that we were okay. Every week I did a thing called Coffee with SG. SG, my initial, Sean Gaillard, and it was through Zoom when we were down in the lockdown, and it was basically an informal coffee talk with staff, just building that camaraderie and building that collaboration. It wasn't agenda. If 5 people showed up and we talked about what we saw on Below Deck Mediterranean or Grey's Anatomy and kibitzed about that, I also used that time too to test my message with different things. So I'd say, listen, folks, I want to try this thing out, or I'm going to say this in the blog, or I'm going to say this in the faculty meeting, or I'm thinking about this. What do you think about that? And actually, once folks started learning that they were getting the inside scoop on things, and I was testing that message, and also to build that psychological safety, I had more people come in for informal coffee. And there was a lot of laughter and joy. And then, like a lot of principals, I did story time, some sort of virtual story time. And again, that was my way to connect with students and families. So I would read a book sometime, and sometimes I might go off script a little bit, as you know that I do. But I use that time, again, to build that sense of psychological safety and encouragement. And I used stories and picture books to do that. So every night there was a story from me, and would do it in my basement. Sometimes I would have my daughters involved with that, and again, to really build that connection. And because it's important for us as leaders, and again, we're human, and not that not that I wanted to spread toxic positivity, because too I wanted to be that sounding board for staff and for students and for families to, hey, I'm overwhelmed, what do we do? And it's okay for folks to voice that and to share that. So again, that visible belief, that's important, not just in terms of a pandemic, but I think that's also important as a leader. We have to show that and demonstrate that in a very visceral, vocal way, so that our the people that we serve know that we believe in them, and that we've got their back.
Yeah, I agree. We had a psychologist who's over psychology at Wake Forest Baptist Zoom in with our whole staff and just let them talk. Like as we were going through it, what are you struggling with? What kind of fears
Yeah.
are you having? How's it going? And then we would break into by school, and then he would do a Zoom call with them. Just let them talk,
Nice.
enjoy being with each other, and then individual. You could do sessions, and it was all free. We took care of that. And that's another piece that came out in these interviews. Jack Hoke, who's executive director for NCSSA, the superintendent's organization here in North Carolina, said, rely on your team, just like you're saying. Continue the communication with your team. Update them kind of along the way. Take them on the journey with you. But as you're doing that, the leader has to do self care. You have to take
Yes.
care of yourself. You kind of learn from previous mistakes. You have better outcomes. You've been there. You've done it before. How do you take care of yourself? I know for me, no one was going anywhere. There was this limited access to church and to others and to events. So we scheduled like 4 different weekends at a lake house for my family and I, just to get away and just to be away from our home because we weren't going anywhere. We're not going out to eat. We're not going out to church. And I will
Yeah.
say that advice to just go, I mean, it was just not an expensive lake house at all. It was just like a lake house out in the middle of nowhere,
Nice.
and we got away. At one point, my parents felt comfortable enough to come. So we were able to do that. My husband and I walk about 3 miles a day. And we did that whole time because if you're not taking care of yourself when you're at the highest point of stress, you can't lead others. And
Exactly.
I know that Avis Williams, who is in Selma, who was in Selma, who's in Baton Rouge now, she said, I got out there and became a fitness guru. I started doing all these fitness things because we knew it was going to continue to be hard. And the year we came back in 2021 was even harder because there was all this political, like you should be in school, you shouldn't be in school, and here are all these other
Mhm.
things. So, how do you help other leaders? Because we're going through a mental health crisis with our students and our staff right now, and we have a high rate of suicidal ideation among kids. It's almost 20% in a lot of communities, which is much higher, almost double what it was before COVID. How do you take care of yourself, and how would you tell leaders who are going through this, either principals or superintendents or teachers, you know, we can't own all of that mental health support.
Oh,
The community has to rally around and provide the resources, but when they're with us, we do feel like there are things we can do to impact them positively. But what do we do to take care of ourselves so that we don't own the weight of everyone's crisis around us? You got any advice for the new leaders?
yeah. Two things. Well, many things to that, because the notion that the principal or the leader in that building is a superhero is a myth. That's Hollywood. And you see, they tend to they do two things in the media with principals. They either tend to glamorize the gig, and the hearts are bleeding and we can do all these things. That's not true. Or it's the other extreme, where the goofy principal in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, right? um and that's not true either. We are human beings, and we are human beings that have chosen the gift of leadership. It is a mantle, and it is a heavy mantle that we carry, but we have to do it. We have to rethink our approach to that by taking care of ourselves. So I'm not getting any younger. And I, in the, during that COVID time, and a little bit before, I think maybe the dear Lord was sending a message to me, because I really, my blood pressure and cholesterol were off the charts. I was not taking care of myself at all. And in order, I guess my wife kind of tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, you got to make a change." So I made a very calculated, I still do, a calculated effort to bring peace and balance into my life. And I do that through several things, namely exercise, where I get up at the crack of dawn. I did invest in some used gym equipment during the COVID time, and so our garage became the garage gym, and I'd get down there on that elliptical, and I would have to force, I still do, I have to force myself to give myself a gift. We're entitled to that as leaders. We are human, and we have to do that. If not, it can lead to a rabbit hole of darkness and despair and depression and anxiety. So whatever that is for leaders, you have to turn school off. It's okay to put the cell phone away. It's okay to leave the laptop in a shelf someplace when you're at home, and if you have to schedule that balance, and it takes discipline. It's not always easy. Start off with a moment. All right, I'm going to give myself 5 minutes in the day where I'm going to go someplace in the schoolhouse where I know it's working, where I know that what we've set out together as a school team or school improvement team is working. I'm going to go, and I'm going to do that for 5 minutes. Or then you build 10 minutes. All right, I'm going to go someplace else. I'm going to give myself 10 minutes where I know that whatever echoes my joy, whatever echoes my core, I'm going to go in that classroom. I'm not going to do a walkthrough. I'm not going to do an observation. I'm just going to be in that moment and remove myself. You have to give yourself that white space too. And if you have to have your secretary or your thought partner or assistant principal or whomever schedule that for you, do it. Put it into your calendar. When I was principal at Kennedy, I had a secretary that would do that for me, and she had my calendar, and it would be 10 minutes of Here Comes the Sun Space. I'm a big Beatles fan, and that was my time where I would go out, either listen to a song. I would go out, maybe write down something. I love to write, so I might write down something, or it would just be 10 minutes of just kind of freely walking around the space and just engaging with kids, engaging with teachers. And then you got to schedule that time for you off campus when you're at home. That's so important. And if you can, there's all kinds of networks out there, and different leaders, fit leaders, and different, educators that are, kind of positive accountability partners. So whether it's walking 3 miles a day with your spouse or your partner, or whether it's, giving yourself 30 minutes and going to the gym, or whatever it is. It may not be exercise. It may be music. It may be watching that cheesy episode of whatever on Netflix. You've got to fill some sort of goodness and balance in your life and restore yourself so that you can be that restorative presence for the people whom you serve. And it's okay to make yourself a priority. It's okay to make those things that you value in your core. And we forget that. We sacrifice and we give, but if you're not careful, you can suffer from imposter syndrome. You can suffer from compassion fatigue, and you can add more anxiety and stress. The gig is stressful as it is. We cannot allow that stress to dictate who we are. And you may not get to everything every day, right? You may not be able to solve. That's why you've got to make sure that you surround yourself with a team. Strengths-based leadership, to me, is the gift that keeps on giving, and teasing out those strengths and trusting your people to help and support and to carry that burden. We can't do it alone. Even though you may be, and I don't know, you may be the principal in your building, or the only superintendent. There aren't two superintendents in Mount Airy City Schools, right? So, that's why you and I believe in the concept of team and collaboration. Lean on those folks. It's okay to delegate, follow through, but but you've got to give yourself the gifts that you deserve, that you need for yourself, for your family, and then for the people whom you serve.
That's right. You have to grace yourself too, because you're not going to be perfect when you're leading through crisis. You're going to make mistakes, but your why and your heart shows through being transparent and sharing with them. I'm just not having a great day today. I need y'all to step up because I'm really struggling. And I really do believe that team is really important. Find your peeps. You got enough people bashing you with negativity. Find some people who are going to lift you
Right.
up a little bit. And
Right.
me, it's some superintendents across the state. It's a lot of principals that I've been good friends with for years, and actually across several states where I'm on some national boards of education. We were all dealing with it in several states. We are now with mental health crisis. How are you dealing with this? What do you think I need to be doing? None of us know how to help students when they're really struggling. We're not professionals in that area, but how can I connect them to some resources that can help them? And sharing those resources across communities is how we get better. But I think gracing ourselves, going to the pre-K classroom, watching them
Yes.
there, it's just pure joy. They didn't care about COVID. They didn't care if they gave you COVID. Yeah, they're still going to climb all over you. So I think every day that I go to pre-K reminds me why I do my job.
Right.
Pretty
And
amazing.
if you could step outside of your usual routine, so if you schedule it, so if it means, and I learned this from the first principal I served when I was AP, Debbie Brooks, when I was in Kernersville Middle School, and I'll never forget this. She would go in the cafeteria and sweep during lunches, and I said, why are you doing this? This is when I first started there, and she says, well, two reasons. One, people need to see us get our hands dirty. Okay, that's important as leaders. They need to see that. Also, well, she actually was three things. Second thing, she says sometimes this is the only clear result that I get in the day. Right?
Make
She
it a
said, dirt, yeah, dirt don't talk back, and I get a very clear result. And then two, and then three, this is where you get the information. This is where you get all those things. So I think it's important for any leader, if you can, whether it's going to that pre-K and room, and you know what, I'm going to be a TA today. I had an opportunity back in the fall. We didn't have a sub here, and there was a scheduling conflict, so I decided to take it on myself, and I sub music class for 2 days. I loved every single second of that, because again, I was out of the principal's office. I was out of my usual routine. It
fun with
renewed
kids.
my core. Yeah, I was with kids. I was with
Oh
music. I
my
had
God.
the best time. I had the best time with it.
We
Um,
we switch out with our teachers at least once a year because they get the United Wave. They put their name in a hat and we draw it out, and I
mm,
get to go be, I think it was a third grade teacher for a day. But it is one of the best days because you remember why you're there. The kids help you. They're like, "Oh, we'll help you, Dr. Morrison. You'll be successful today." Okay, good. Glad you're going to help me. But really, I think that is one that all leaders could take while you're going through a very difficult crisis. Yes, we've got to think about the weighty stuff we're dealing with, but we need to remember the joy every day. And remember, there may be one parent that's really giving you a hard time, but think about the 99 that aren't. Call up the parents and just say some positive things about their children and say, so how's it going? How can we work together in a positive light as opposed to always calling them when you're bringing bad news. But so that's kind of it today. We were going to talk about like our core beliefs, how to build this kind of network that have similar core beliefs so we can do this work and take care of ourselves. Is there anything else in this trend of your core beliefs and kind of rallying the troops around you who have similar beliefs to do the work? Anything else you would want to share as we close out?
that outreach, Kim, is so important. I cannot stress that enough. If you can find folks with like job alike gigs, and really, I have several principals, that I'll speak with in the morning, on the way to work or what have you, that, or on Twitter, in your professional learning network. um Leadership is, and when we take those courageous stands, can be very lonely and very isolating and very alienating. And if you can find that group, find that band to play off of and to help sustain you, I think is essential to what we do. And again, that visible belief, and knowing that when you respond to something, that's at least you responded to that bad event or that bad phone call. But courage is we got to work that memory muscle into that, and it's important. And you lean on those folks to help sustain and give you that courage. But I've enjoyed our conversation. This has been great. It's always great talking with you.
Yeah, we're trying to encourage other leaders because, we live through some interesting things. And I do believe we learned some lessons that will help us realize we can get through anything if we're doing what we need to be doing for children, and they will benefit from our courageous leadership. So I appreciate your courageous leadership. I'm looking forward to this series of podcasts, and I'm glad you're a part.
Thank you, Kim. Honored to be a part of it and grateful for the opportunity to chat with you today. Thank you so much.